And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast for the second time today. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, this will not be a full-length episode, but I want to discuss a movie that was kind of important in the family because both my father, who passed a couple of years ago, and my aunt, who is still very much with us, were huge fans of a TV program, which was purportedly a trivia contest type of a show called 21. And in 1994, Robert Redford, who had won an Oscar for directing Ordinary People, which also won Best Picture in the year of Raging Bull, no, thank you. I'm all set here. Should not have beaten Raging Bull. And I love Robert Redford, but he should not have won Best Director over Martin Scorsese. But that's beside the point. Robert Redford, who remembered the scandals, a little older than my dad and my aunt, but he was fascinated by the story. And so he made a movie called, not surprisingly, Quiz Show, because 21, that was the Blackjack movie about 15 years ago. But the name of the television program, the trivia game, was 21. The movie Quiz Show was released 30 years ago today on September 14th, 1994. And just for perspective, I don't necessarily consider 94 to be, is it a top 3 year in the 90s? If it is, it's on the strength of this film and Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, and Shawshank. Shawshank actually was released a week later. Just one of those things, a historical quirk. Shawshank, Pulp Fiction, and Forrest Gump were all released within, I think, 3 months of one another. Just a kind of a historical tidbit. But the thing with Quiz Show, with the movie and with the real story behind it, is it asks a lot of questions that people might not necessarily think of in the first place. And when they do think of it, they might not know the answers to. So the real story here, and I'm going to have to go into spoilers because this movie is mostly based on fact. There was a Brooklyn guy, a real character named Herbie Stemple, played by John Turturro, a great actor, and he's terrific in this film. He was the champion on this TV show where the format was one person would answer questions, another person would answer questions, and whoever got to 21 first won the game. It's a similar format to a lot of the, whether it's Jeopardy, what was that show from the 80s, which I got such a kick out of, Sale of the Century, but a lot of the question answer type game shows. This was one of the first game shows. And so in the real world, there was a young academic named Charles Van Doren who came from a family of very well-respected academics, including the father, whose name was Mark Van Doren. And TV, quote unquote, the powers that be putting this TV show on decided that Charles Van Doren looked really nice and he's very photogenic and he was a very attractive guy, and they wanted him to be the champ. They wanted him to win and continue to win because they had an idea that we'll get a lot more people watching because this guy is very attractive. And people watch, they're not watching trivia. They're not even necessarily watching the personalities. They're watching the do-re-mi. They're watching the money. And so they engineer a situation where Charles Van Doren, played really well by Ralph Fiennes. It was Ralph's first film after the previous year's Schindler's List, where he was nominated for supporting actor, and a lot of people thought that he should have won. Not the first time that Ralph gave a great performance, and a lot of people thought he should have won, and probably won't be the last time. So he plays Charles Van Doren, and he sees that it's really not okay that they're going to be feeding him questions, and he's going to kind of know the answers in advance, but he goes along with it, and then the story takes off from there. So the thing that you're supposed to ask is, this is unethical, everybody would agree that what the network was doing, and there were a lot of people that had to be involved in this level of decision making, what the network was doing was unethical, immoral. But the question, and this is something the film grapples with, and even watching the movie 30 years ago and thinking back on when this TV show aired and when this happened in real time. Unethical, immoral, but should it be illegal? Are we talking about some kind of censoring of the network, or the TV program should be banned or thrown off the air, or the producers behind the show should never work? And these are the things that we think about. And the movie doesn't really make judgments. The only judgments the movie ends up making are the audience is taken for a ride, and they thought that it was on the level. And this is where you run into trouble in reality TV, and in some cases documentaries, even whether documentary series or full-length documentaries, where it is purportedly fact. It is a factual narrative that we are seeing. It is a true story that we are seeing. We believe that it's on the level. And then if it turns out that a lot of it was canned, we feel cheated. Now, in those instances, we maybe just want a disclaimer or something. For example, and I love Michael Moore as a filmmaker, even if he's a very polarizing personality. But for example, Roger and Me, his first film and what many consider to be his finest work to this day, it's 35 years old itself, he played around with the timeline. There were things that he suggested in the movie that happened, but they didn't happen the way he presented it. And that is that playing fair? Is that playing unfair? You're making a movie, yeah, but you say it's a documentary. It's supposed to be more or less a true account, right? In this case, we're talking about an entire now country viewing audience, because more and more people were getting televisions at the time, and you're telling them a story that this is real. This is not a mock-up of a game show. This is not scripted. This is reality. Charles Van Doren defeated Herbert Stempel, and it's just because he knew the answers and the other guy didn't. People, when they found out, were horrified. But where my dad and his sister, my Aunt Marcia, what they told me, because I remember they were both so excited when they realized that this movie was in the pipeline, that it was going to be, coming out. They didn't really get that fired up too often. But Dad told a story how it was must-see TV. This was the first program that he could remember that the entire family gathered around at their apartment in the Bronx, just off Decatur Avenue, the Mosholu Parkway, but they would gather around a 12-inch television. Reception had to be shit, but they would gather around and watch Charles Van Doren win. And because of those memories, and then learning that it was a crock of shit, people felt betrayed. And the character played really well by Rob Morrow. He had been on the TV show called Northern Exposure, which was never a huge hit in the ratings. It's about a guy who ends up moving to Alaska, I think. Is it for his family or for work? I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't watch the show. But Rob Morrow didn't have a big movie career, but he is very good in this film as what amounts to a congressional investigator trying to get to the bottom of this fucking bullshit. Like something stinks. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. And Mira Sorvino, who the following year ended up winning an Oscar herself for supporting actress in Mighty Aphrodite. I think Mira plays his wife in the film. And it's a very interesting dynamic that the character of Dick Goodwin, which is the Rob Morrow character, he becomes friends with Ralph Fiennes' Charles Van Doren. And he really likes and respects the guy. But it's a question of, bro, you can like this guy, but he's not nearly as good of a person as you are. You would never have taken part in this. As soon as they said they were going to feed you answers, you would say, go fuck yourself. Either I'm going to win or I'm going to lose. This guy was corruptible. You come from a family of hoity-toity academics, you're a fucking cheat. It wasn't your idea, but you went along with it. Nobody forced you to do it. So my dad and my aunt, independent of one another, both saw the movie in theaters, and they both absolutely loved it. And it's interesting because Quiz Show was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, and it was nominated for the two biggest, in my opinion. Well, for me, Best Director, Best Picture. Redford was up for both. And Quiz Show, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, it actually has a higher score than Forrest Gump, a considerably higher score. I think Gump is 89 and Quiz Show is 97. You could do the math. That means that for every 33 critics, 32 told you to see the movie. And maybe the one who didn't said, yeah, it just wasn't my cup of tea. So this is a great film. This is not just a historical, recreation of a series of historical events. It is a great motion picture. It had functions almost like a thriller, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. You would think it would be more like a docudrama, but it almost comes across more like a dramatic thriller. So Dad loved it. Aunt Marcia loved it. And it's the kind of movie that they still talk about, or that my aunt would still talk about all of these years later. So at those Oscars, there was an idea that maybe Quiz Show could somehow pull an upset either in picture or director. Well, it had a better chance for director because of Redford's popularity. But the idea was that the big hitters of Gump and Pulp and Shawshank, maybe they would kind of cancel each other out and Quiz Show could sneak into one of the big two. That didn't happen. Quiz Show did not. It got shut out at the Oscars. But then again, so did the Shawshank Redemption, which is idiotic. And Pulp Fiction, the biggest award it got, Quentin Tarantino and his writing partner for that film, Roger Avary, they ended up picking up the screenplay Oscar, best screenplay, excuse me. But Forrest Gump dominated those Oscars. Now, if you ask me, is Quiz Show a better movie than Forrest Gump? I mean, it's not as problematic as Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump does go to a lot of places that you're not expecting. I think Forrest Gump is very good, though. I'm not one of those, I'm not going to give you the revisionist history that it was a disgrace or it's disgusting, or a movie can be problematic and still be worth seeing and still be a great movie. But you can still talk about the things and why it's problematic. I've been doing that for decades, right? It's no big deal. People argue and debate movies all the time. Well, this is okay. This is not okay. This might have been okay then, but it isn't okay now. And we can talk about that. Is that all right? No problem. I think that Quiz Show is as good a movie as Forrest Gump. They're so different. Like you can't even begin to compare those two films. We just tried to, but you understand what I'm saying. Quiz Show is a great movie. It is perfectly calibrated, and Redford was very good with the casting. He got exactly the right people. Even Martin Scorsese played a role of a TV executive. He's one of the guys with the wink, wink, nudge, nudge in on the fix, kind of a guy. And Martin he's actually a really good actor. Remember him in Taxi Driver, that unbelievable scene in Robert De Niro's Travis Bickle is fucking lunatic. Compared to the guy in the cab, Travis Bickle is very, very sane. He is super sane compared to the lunatic in the back of his cab. And De Niro, the look on his face when he sees this guy, what are you writing? Don't write! But Quiz Show, released on this day, 1994, a fantastic film directed by one of the GOATs. When you take directing and acting, Robert Redford, unbelievable. He's so good behind the camera in this film, getting the best possible performances and very distinctive performances from Ralph Fiennes and especially John Turturro, who, I mean, he could have easily gotten a supporting actor nomination, although Paul Scofield, who played Mark Van Doren, the father of Charles Van Doren, he actually got a supporting actor nomination, and there was some talk that he might win because he's kind of a legendary name, but he did not win the supporting actor Oscar. That particular year, it went to Martin Landau for one of my all-time favorite films, Tim Burton's Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp in my single favorite Johnny Depp performance as Edward D. Wood Jr., or Ed Wood, the worst filmmaker in the history of Hollywood. But Quiz Show, released 30 years ago today, directed by Robert Redford and starring Ralph Fiennes, Mira Sorvino, Rob Morrow, and John Turturro, with a terrific supporting performance from Martin Scorsese and a whole host of terrific actors whose names I don't necessarily remember. But it is a fantastic film. It's readily available on streaming, and Quiz Show gets my absolute highest recommendation, a true story that is as riveting as fiction. This has been episode 304 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening for this kind of half episode on this fine evening in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.